30 years ago, the world watched for the first time what some consider to be the best movie ever made, The Shawshank Redemption. As an artist, I can tell you this much. That is a subjective choice. There is absolutely no way anyone can objectively determine what is the best piece of art. Movie, music, literature, painting, you name it. But that's a discussion for another time. But regardless, this is a great movie. It sits at the top of my Morgan Freeman movies list. And yes, Morgan Freeman is one of my all-time favorite actors. 7, The Bucket List, Driving Miss Daisy, 10 items or less. You can't help but love Morgan Freeman. But back to The Shawshank Redemption. Did you know that in 2015, the United States Library of Congress selected this film for preservation in the National Film Registry, finding it culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant? And I concur. I borrowed that line from another movie that I plan to review here sometime. Maybe you can guess which one. I mean, the project was so big to start with, it attracted many stars for the role of Andy, including Tom Hanks, Tom Cruise, and Kevin Costner. But really, although all of those are great actors, I cannot imagine anyone doing a better job than Tim Robbins. Tim is absolutely fabulous here, isn't he? I highly doubt that any of you watching this video haven't already seen The Shawshank Redemption, but since I personally do know quite a good number of people who haven't, let me take the time to say, if you haven't already watched The Shawshank Redemption, please pause this video, go get the movie, and relax for the next 2 hours and 22 minutes while you watch an utterly beautiful story about friendship and hope. And while you're doing that, let's see if you remember this. Friendship and hope. This is what The Shawshank Redemption is all about, right? I mean, the plot itself is overall not extraordinarily outstanding. We've seen variations on this idea before, but the telling of the story, the nuances, Freeman's commentaries are simply beautiful. In early 1947, a banker convicted for murdering his wife and her lover begins to serve 2 consecutive life sentences in a prison where he is befriended by Ellis Red Redding, who's also serving a life sentence. Assigned to work in the prison laundry, Andy is frequently raped by the prison gang The Sisters and their leader, Boggs Diamond. In 1949, Andy overhears the captain of the guards, Byron Hadley, complaining about being taxed on an inheritance and offers to help him shelter the money legally. Warden Samuel Norton meets Andy and reassigns him to the decrepit prison library to assist elderly inmate Brooks Hatlin in a pretext to use Andy's financial expertise to manage financial matters for other prison staff, guards from other prisons, and the warden himself. In 1963, Norton begins exploiting prison labor for public works, profiting by undercutting skilled labor costs and receiving bribes. Andy launders the money using the alias Randall Stevens. In 1965, Andy and Red befriend Tommy Williams, a young prisoner who reveals to them that his cellmate at another prison had claimed responsibility for the murders for which Andy was convicted. Andy brings the information to Norton, who refuses to listen. When Andy mentions the money laundering, Norton sends Andy to solitary confinement and has Hadley fatally shoot Thomas under the guise of an escape attempt. Andy is released from solitary confinement after 2 months and tells a skeptical Red that he dreams of living in a Mexican town on the Pacific coast. He asks Red to promise, once he is released, to travel to a specific hayfield near Buxton and recover a package he buried there. Red worries about Andy's mental well-being, especially when he learns Andy asked a fellow inmate for a length of rope. At the next day's roll call, the guards find Andy's cell empty. An irate Norton throws a rock at a poster of Raquel Welch hanging on the cell wall, revealing a tunnel that Andy had dug with his rock hammer over the course of nearly 2 decades. The previous night, Andy had used the rope to escape, taking Norton's suit, shoes, and ledger containing evidence of the money laundering and corruption at Shawshank. While guards search for him, Andy poses as Randall Stevens, the alias used for money laundering, withdraws over $370,000, which is about $3.5 million today, and mails the ledger to a local newspaper. State police arrive at Shawshank and take Hadley into custody, while Norton commits suicide to avoid arrest. The following year, Red is paroled after serving 40 years, but struggles to adapt to life outside prison and fears that he never will. Remembering his promise to Andy, he visits Buxton and finds a cache containing money and a letter asking him to come to that little Mexican town on the Pacific coast that Andy had told him about. Red violates his parole by traveling to Fort Hancock, Texas, and crossing the border into Mexico. He finds Andy standing an old boat on a beach, and the two reunited friends happily embrace. Now, before moving forward, let me just add that this movie is presented as a story narrated by Morgan Freeman, Red. And that adds some delicious seasoning to the entire mix. So now that we have the plot fresh in our minds, let's start by looking at the best scene. After sending to the state legislature 1 letter every week for 6 years, Andy finally gets the first response, a $200 check for his library project, as well as a room full of boxes with books and music records, and the request to stop sending letters, of course. To which he says,
"From now on, I'll write 2 letters a week instead of 1.
The guard who congratulates him makes a trip to the bathroom, asking Andy to clear the space. But Andy cannot contain his excitement. He lets a wow escape his lips, with an intense hunger in his eyes. What a treasure! Books and music! But before he starts carrying the boxes out, he sits to look through some records in one of the boxes and picks up a copy of Mozart's Figaro. You can tell by the expression on his face that he's already out of prison, a free man somewhere in the unbound land of art, of music. He pulls the record out, blows the dust off, and does the unimaginable. He sets it on the turntable and starts playing it. With its first notes, the music fills the space, expanding it. And then the soprano voice. A divine sound those walls have never before heard. Andy is so absorbed by the music that he has completely forgotten about the guard in the bathroom. But the guard says,
"Andy, do you hear that?"
That. Do you hear that? Andy jolts back to reality and within seconds makes up his mind. That cannot be stopped. That should not be stopped. That will not be stopped. So he quickly locks the guard inside the bathroom and locks the office door. Nobody is allowed to touch that. As he sets the key back on the desk, he sees the microphone the warden uses to make announcements to the entire prison. And without a second thought, Andy turns it on, and the entire prison and its surroundings is filled with music. Now, let's stop here for a moment and ask ourselves, what does that mean? Did he know what he was risking? No, he perfectly knew he wasn't risking. He knew what was surely going to come to him because of it. But you see, Andy, 1, could not keep it only to himself, and 2, he knew that although most of the inmates there were not educated, that music transcends and penetrates every human being, crossing any barrier. Andy knew, and Andy played it for them. Red's voice overlaps the music, saying, "I have no idea to this day what those 2 Italian ladies were singing about." Of course he didn't, but he liked to think it was something so beautiful it can't be expressed in words, and it makes your heart ache because of it. The warden and a handful of guards come rushing to the door, knocking and threatening Andy, but all they can see through the glass is a relaxed Andy, because he is free. And as the warden demands he open the door and turn that off, Andy hesitates for a brief second with his hand beside the pin. But then he decides. He will not surrender his freedom. He will not let the music go. No, not him. Look at his face. It speaks without words. This is beyond you, warden. I will not let you touch it. As he turns the volume up, the chief guard says, "Dufresne, you're mine now," and breaks the door, while Andy closes his eyes, enjoying the last few seconds of music. And then, that sound, the sound of music being executed, the sound of freedom being taken away. Now wait, I'm not yet at the best scene. It's not this one, but to get the full impact of it, we have to set the stage. So Andy gets 2 weeks in the hole for that insubordination of his, and when his friends ask him if it was worth it, Andy replies, "The easiest time I ever did." To which they launch into this conversation saying things like, "There's no such thing as an easy time in the hole, and a week in the hole is like a year." Andy replies, "I had Mr. Mozart to keep me company." His friends are confused, asking him sarcastically if they allowed him to tote his record down there. "The music was here and here," says Andy. "That's the one thing they can't confiscate, not ever. That's the beauty of it. Haven't you ever felt that way about music, Red?" Red tells him that he played harmonica as a young man, but he lost interest since it didn't make much sense in the prison. "Here's where it makes the most sense. You need it so you don't forget," replies Andy. Red, as well as the others, are confused and do not understand what Andy is talking about. Forget what?
There's something inside that they can't get to, that they can't touch. It's yours.
Red still does not understand. What are you talking about?
Hope.
To which Red launches into a warning lecture explaining to Andy how dangerous hope is, that it has no use in here, and advises him to get used to the idea.
I hope I can make it across the border. I hope to see my friend and shake his hand. I hope the Pacific is as blue as it has been in my dreams. I hope.
It reminds me again of one of my all-time favorite bits of poetry by Emily Dickinson. "Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul, and sings the tune without the words, and never stops at all." That's it. That is the best scene. But you have to have watched everything that comes before it in order to appreciate the power and depth of these words. A man without hope is a dead man, just like Brooks, and so was Red. The movie shows us that Red was on the same path as Brooks. But his friend's hope saved him by kindling hope in his own heart and causing him to pursue it. I could talk for hours about the depth and the beauty of this scene, of this movie for that matter. But now let's go to the funniest scene. After Andy gets the books and the records, he starts to set up the library. In this scene, he and his friends are going through the books, with Andy deciding and instructing which category every book belongs to. Haywood picks up a book and laboriously reads,
Count Monte Cristo.
To which one of the others replies, "That's Christo, you dumb ship." Haywood continues reading,
By Alexandre Dumas.
Red bursts out laughing while Andy asks, "Dumbass?" To which Haywood proudly shows the front page, knowing that he will prove that he's right and everybody is wrong to be laughing at him. I don't feel the need to comment on that one, but I'll just say that it's brilliant. Now, for the saddest scene of the movie. Well, it's connected to the saddest case in the movie. That is Brooks. He is paroled after serving 50 years. In a panic attack, he's close to committing a crime just to stay in there longer. He has to say goodbye to his friend the Crow, and then he leaves the prison. But outside, he feels like he is nothing. He has no identity and does not belong. And the saddest scene is when... But I really can't display it here. It's too painful. It's when Brooks commits suicide. Why is this the saddest scene? I mean, we witness the death of another inmate at the beginning of the movie, and the execution of another one in the middle of the movie, but neither of those are so sad. The physical death, I mean. The prison killed Brooks' real identity, his capacity to hope, to dream, to live. He could not live outside the prison. He had become institutionalized, a part of the institution, a part of the prison. The prison was his life, his identity. He became, to his very core, an inmate and could not escape that identity anymore. And that is incredibly sad. Now, moving on to the most unexpected turn of the movie, I have to ask, is it the one when Tommy Williams shows up in the movie and reveals the identity of the real murderer of Andy's wife and his lover? I'm asking this because the way the movie starts, showing Andy drinking in the car and loading his gun, makes us think that he actually might have been the real criminal after all. The only problem is that the way the movie develops, the way Andy's character and personality are presented, gradually diminishes that suspicion, thereby making Tommy's disclosure not so terribly unexpected after all. And no, I also didn't believe that Andy was planning to kill himself when Red and the others panicked about him obtaining a 6-foot rope. But what really caught me was this. The warden singing A Mighty Fortress, Ein Festburg, Martin Luther's iconic hymn. I mean, I understand that he was using religion just to look good, but whistling a hymn, that hymn, when he was just with Andy, when he was leaving work to go home, the gall of it. Okay, it's not an unexpected turn, but it is an even more unexpected type of, I was about to say human being, but that's not a human being. It's beyond hypocrisy. And after a scene like that, I'm just left wondering, how is that even possible? Just how? And of course, it reminds me of other scenes, such as the one with Alva from The Sting. Remember? If you haven't watched my take on that, you can find it here. The best line goes to one in Andy's letter to Red, which Red reads on a hot summer day under the oak tree beside the stone wall. And it goes like this.
Remember, Red, hope is a good thing, maybe the best of things, and no good thing ever dies.
That's all I have to say about that. Just to quote another great line from another great movie, which I expect you immediately recognize, right? Now, onto the funniest line. This time, it goes to a line which didn't make me laugh, but rather laugh-cry. It's funny, but in a sad, rather tragic sort of way. The entire team of friends are on the roof enjoying the cold beers Andy managed to get for them after offering his financial assistance to the chief of guards, nearly free of charge. It's 10 o'clock in the morning, the second to the last day of the job. I love these expressions sprinkled everywhere in the movie. They're so rich and colorful. And they all sit around drinking icy cold bohemian-style beer. They sat and drink with the sun on their shoulders and felt like free men.
Hell, we could have been tarring the roof of one of our own houses.
Says Red to himself. And then this.
We were the lords of all creation.
It makes you smile, right? Unexpected and funny. Brutally funny, as it reveals the deep roots of human dignity. The best movie ever? Maybe. Maybe for you, maybe for a certain mood or a certain phase of life, but certainly one of those movies which we can and we should revisit, at least from time to time. In our 30s, in our 50s, even in our 70s. Let me know in the comments below what you think about it. Like and subscribe for more, many more, and that was Amy's cut on The Shawshank Redemption.